13 years old, pregnant, and shaping the future. The shocking fate of Lady Margaret Beaufort. In a world where innocence meets scandal, Lady Margaret Beaufort stood at the heart of a storm no one saw coming. She was just 13, with wide, eager eyes and a spirit that shone like a beacon. But just beneath that surface lay a truth so shocking it could shake the very foundations of society. She was pregnant, carrying a child that could change the course of history. Whispers echoed in hushed tones, every corner of the court aflame with speculation. Gasps filled the air, and the tension was palpable, wrapping around her like cold chains. What kind of future awaited a girl trapped in a web of secrets? The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the stone walls of her ancestral home, as she sat alone, the weight of her reality pressing down like an iron shroud. Every night, she would hear the relentless pounding of her heart, beating a symphony of fear. Every glance from the aristocrats felt like a knife, cutting deeper into her already strained soul. Would they see her as a future queen, or merely a scandal? But Margaret was not just a pawn in a game crafted by men. There was something powerful in her, something that could turn the tides. Despite the swirling chaos, her resolve burned bright. She would not be a mere consequence of her choices. She intended to wield her fate like a sword. How ironic was it that the very world that sought to vilify her could end up paving her way to glory? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the moon cast silver beams across the cobblestone paths, shadows danced in the darkness, whispering secrets of old. What was to happen next? Margaret's mind churned with possibilities, mixed with a trepidation that gnawed at her heart. She could feel the world's judgment looming, a storm ready to break. Who would stand by her side? And when the truth finally emerged, would it be a blessing or the beginning of her downfall? The walls felt like they were closing in, and the air thickened with anticipation as destiny loomed on the horizon, ready to confront her in a way she could never imagine. The dawn painted the sky with a blush of crimson, but Margaret felt no warmth. Instead, dread washed over her like a frigid tide. Today was the day everything would change. Today, her secret would draw the world's ire, or worse, their pity. She paced the dimly lit chamber, her heart drumming a march of anxiety. The rags that hung in the corners fluttered like ghosts, mocking her solitude. With every step, shadows clung, and the whisper of her name echoed back at her, taunting. Margaret pregnant at 13, it felt like a dirge to the dreams she had nurtured. The door creaked open, and her mother glided in, her face a mask of concern mixed with a hint of determination. Lady Margaret Beaufort had always been a woman of grit. You must prepare yourself, she urged softly, her voice heavy with foreboding. The court will demand answers. Answers? Margaret's voice trembled as she turned away, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. All they want is to see me broken. Her mother reached out, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. Strength, my dear. You must be strong. You are not alone in this. But both of them knew, deep down, that strength was a fragile facade. The weight of the expected judgment pressed heavily on Margaret's spirit. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out and clutch at her legs as she headed toward the great hall. Each step felt like a march to the gallows, condemned before the trial had even begun. As she stepped into the hall, the atmosphere shifted. Eyes turned, whispers crescendoed, gnawing at her like a pack of wolves. They were watching, waiting. The Duke was there, his expression stern, calculating. Lady Margaret, he greeted, his voice a dagger she wasn't ready to face. The court's interest in your situation is unprecedented. The venom laced in his words made her stomach churn. She stood tall, hiding the quiver in her hands, but the pulse in her throat quickened, betraying her composure. I am not a spectacle for your amusement, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The murmurs surged, rippling through the assembled courtiers like a dark wave. The Duke raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Then what are you, young lady? A herald of scandal? Perhaps a herald of change, she shot back, feeling a flicker of defiance ignite within her. Could she truly be both daring and naive? Margaret felt the collective breath of the court, their disbelief wrapping around her, heavy but invigorating. Change. The Duke leaned forward, a sinister smile curving on his lips. I do hope you understand just how deep this river of change can flow. When the truth of your child is revealed, you may find that you are swimming against a current far stronger than yourself. A heavy silence filled the air, pregnant with tension. Could she rise above the chaos? Would the rebellious hope within her see her through? Suddenly, a figure stepped from behind the crowd, a woman with fiery red hair and piercing green eyes. It was Lady Anne, her fiercest rival, known for her cunning. Do you really think you can use this child as a weapon, Margaret? She sneered, her voice dripping with scorn. You are simply a pawn in a game larger than you can comprehend. Margaret's heart thundered. Anne's words ignited fear in her, but within it lay a spark. What if I am not merely a pawn? She replied, her voice holding a resolve that shocked even herself. What if my child changes the outcome for us all? The laughter of the court rang hollow, yet beneath it, she sensed hesitation. Whispers filled the room like an electric charge, and the Duke's expression shifted slightly, uncertainty flashing in his eyes. This was her moment. Would she forge a path through the storm, or succumb to the weight of their expectation? As she met the gazes staring back at her, a plan began to unfurl in her mind. But just as Margaret turned to the Duke, ready to confront him with demands of her own, a sudden commotion erupted at the entrance. A figure stumbled forth, breathless and frantic, someone bringing news that would shake the very foundations of their world. What new horror have you brought? The Duke barked, anger mingling with curiosity, his entire demeanor shifting as if sensing a fresh threat. Margaret's heart raced. What was this new twist? What could possibly follow her already tumultuous revelation? Your Grace, the messenger gasped, there's been a breach in the castle, and it looks like our enemies have come to play. Hope and terror collided in Margaret's chest. Would this chaos swallow her whole, or would she seize the opportunity to change her destiny forever? As eyes widened around her, she found herself standing on the precipice of fate, ready to leap into unknown depths. The moment of reckoning drew near. How would she rise from this upheaval? Margaret's mind raced. As the door to the past closed behind her, another door cracked open in the distance, and the world was about to know her name not just as a subject of scandal, but perhaps as a force to be reckoned with. But first, she had to survive the game. And somewhere in the shadows, a darker truth loomed, waiting just a heartbeat away. The hall erupted into chaos. Courtiers rushed to the windows, eager to spot the commotion outside. A cacophony of questions filled the air, rapidly overshadowing Margaret's vulnerability. She felt small among the towering figures, yet within her, a spark ignited. This was her chance. Your Grace, we must act swiftly, the messenger implored, his voice rising above the frenzy. The gates are breached, and there's no telling how many have infiltrated the castle. Margaret's pulse quickened, each beat urging her to find her place in the storm. Instead of crumbling under the pressure, she straightened her posture and pushed through the throng of nobles, her eyes searching for the Duke. He was still watching her, calculating, but now she detected a flicker of something else. Intrigue? Fear? Lady Margaret, the Duke said, his voice a mixture of authority and bemusement. You may hold more power in your hands than you realize. What will you do now? Now, Margaret replied, her voice rising above the tumult. Now is when we must unite. If our enemies are at the gates, we cannot afford to stand divided. This child, my child, may very well be our future. We must protect it. Gasps rippled outward, eyes wide with disbelief. Had a 13-year-old just commanded the court's attention? The murmurs shifted, a current of boldness beginning to weave through the fear. Such naivety. Lady Anne scoffed again, stepping forward to reclaim the stage. You think you can rally us with mere words? You're still a child, and look where your choices have led you. Perhaps I am both a child and a harbinger of change. Margaret countered, her voice trembling not with fear, but with fervor. You think I'm merely a pawn? I will not be used. I will fight for what I believe. The messenger's frantic calls faded into the background of Margaret's thoughts. Her heart thrummed with defiance. The room fell silent, tension crackling like an unlit fuse. Deep within her, dark dread and lightened determination weaved together, and in that pulse of solidarity, Margaret stood taller. "Let them come," she declared, feeling emboldened by the flames of her emotions. "If they want a battle, let us show them our strength together. Forget your scorn, and, rather, stand with me as leaders, not foes." The courtiers glanced around, exchanged uncertain looks. Fear was thick like fog, but amid the unease, Margaret glimpsed something new, a glimmer of hope. Somehow, they were drawn to her dueling spirit, her audacity igniting a ripple of expectation. The Duke's gaze darkened, but Margaret sensed a shift in the dynamic. "Very well," he replied, composed, using measured cadence. "If it's unity you seek, then prove it. Do you have a plan?" "Yes," she exclaimed, words spilling from her. "We need defenses, couriers to alert the surrounding realms, and we must bolster our ranks. Not as mere bystanders, but as warriors for my child's future." The hall buzzed with whispers. Slowly, a few courageous souls stepped closer, inspired despite themselves. The Duke remained skeptical, his lips pressed tight, his fingers adjusting on the armrest of his throne, a subtle sign he wasn't all opposed. But before she could gather herself further, a crash echoed from the entrance. Guards rushed in, swords drawn, their faces pale and eyes wide. "My lord, the attackers are already within the courtyard." Panic struck again, igniting the room. The Duke's expression hardened into one of resolve as he rose from his seat, silencing the crowd with a commanding presence. "Everyone to your posts. We cannot falter now. We fight." "Wait," Margaret shouted, her heart leaping. "I can help. Together we can organize a defense." The Duke turned sharply. "You think a child can lead us in battle?" In that moment, Margaret saw not only their impending doom, but her opportunity. The court didn't need a knight. They needed a vision, and she could offer that. "I may be young, but I see more than you know. Stand with me." The voices began to hush, eyes shifting from fear to curiosity. Perhaps it wasn't too late for her to be more than a mere girl caught in scandal. Maybe she could be the architect of their salvation. As confusion swirled around her, Margaret stepped forward with newfound purpose. "I refuse to be ridiculed or shamed when my voice holds power. Let us unite not just as survivors, but as warriors. This child is a symbol of our fight." And then a blinding flash erupted outside the hall, illuminating the darkened sky. Screams pierced the air, echoed by the swift thud of approaching feet. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Was this her moment? Would she stand strong enough to defy fate? As she readied herself for what was surely about to unfold, something deep inside whispered of the hidden truth that lingered behind her circumstances. Just as she gathered her breath to shout one last rallying cry, a chilling declaration emerged from the shadows. "The baby, it must die." And with that, the floor beneath her seemed to teeter on the brink of collapse, as darkness threatened to swallow her whole. Margaret gasped, her resolve steeling against the encroaching chaos. The stakes just edged higher, and she was about to confront what she could no longer avoid, the twisted game in which her destiny was entangled. What did they mean by that? What dark resolution lay ahead? The blast of chaos outside shattered the moment, sending icy fingers of fear creeping along Margaret's spine. Her heart thundered in her chest, each beat a reminder of the fragile life she carried within. She couldn't let fear paralyze her. Not now. The Duke's features twisted into grim determination. "Get the women and children to safety. We must hold the gates." Swords clashed as guards moved swiftly to arm themselves, some leaving the hall, others staying to defend the throne room. In the midst of the chaos, Margaret felt strangely tethered, anchored by the weight of her future and the urgency of her circumstances. She turned to the Duke, fighting to maintain eye contact through the flurry of movement and shouts. "Your Grace, my plan. We can fortify the entrance, set up distractions while we reinforce the weakest flanks at the gates," she urged, her voice rising above the clamor, his brow furrowed, hesitation creeping into his guarded expression. "And what experience do you have that would suggest a 13-year-old can lead us? I might be young, but this child," she placed her hands protectively over her stomach. "We must fight for our tomorrow. I'll lend my voice, but I need your sword." For an agonizing heartbeat, he studied her, searching for the truth in her plea. Then he turned, his voice booming once more. "Muster the soldiers. The enemy may strike at any moment." Suddenly, the doors were flung open, and in prowled figures clad in black. They advanced with a ferocity that sent icy chills racing down Margaret's arms. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the insignia, the very same crest that marked their ancient rivals, the House of Ashen Frost. "Stand down." Their leader boomed, a hulking figure shrouded in a dark cloak. "Yield the child to us, and we might spare your lives. Resist, and we'll spill blood in this hall." Margaret's heart hammered. They sought her child as bait? "No," she cried out, her voice slicing through the pall of fear like a knife. "This child is not a bargaining chip, nor a weapon. They come for more than just our throats." She met the Duke's wide eyes with her own fierce resolve, desperate to convey the truth lurking beneath their fear. "If they want my child, they want our future. They want to stop at a fight. This is about control." "Foolish child," the leader sneered, his dark eyes glinting with malice. "Submit, and perhaps you'll live to see tomorrow." Margaret's heart raced as she processed the man standing before them. He wasn't just a pawn in this game. He was a player. The realization hit her like a fist. "He wants us to fracture, to turn on each other," she breathed, suddenly understanding her role. "Let me rally our forces. We can outsmart them. I may not be a knight, but I can inspire." The chaos quieted for a moment, eyes narrowing at her proposal. The lurking resentment of her youth transformed into something galvanizing. If they saw her as a potential leader, they might stir to action, but doubt flickered in the Duke's gaze. "Margaret, it's time to show them strength," she urged fiercely. "We can do this together. If they want what's ours, let us not make it easy for them." Then, from the other side of the hall, Lady Anne spoke up, her tone low but laced with relent. "She may have a point, Duke. If we don't act now, we risk losing everything. We can't afford to underestimate her." The murmurs swelled, shifting from disbelief to something approaching solidarity. It wasn't perfect, but Margaret felt the tug of their potential gathering, shadows of fear transforming into an army of conviction. The enemy leader's face darkened. "Your defiance will cost you dearly." The air felt thick as they braced for an imminent storm, the stakes ever higher. In that moment, she understood all too well the battle unfolding wouldn't just be fought on the courtyard, but within their very hearts. "Prepare the defenses. We fight for our future," Margaret shouted, feeling the tide of resolution swell beneath her skin as the soldiers shuffled into their positions, ready to defend what mattered most. Margaret's voice soared, cutting through the tension. "Let us be the guardians of tomorrow, not just becalmed whispers in history's pages." But before she could push them forward, something flickered over the darkness, a shadow in the corner of her eye, an edge of doubt creeping in. If they were willing to sacrifice her child, what were they prepared to lose? And then came a thunderous crash from the entrance. A new wave of black-clad figures stormed in, reinforcements that forced the castle to its knees. This was only the beginning, a mere prelude to a game far darker than she envisioned. Margaret swallowed hard, understanding that in this fight, she wasn't just saving her child. She had to confront the shadows of the past that loomed over them all. With a surge of defiance, she pressed onward, clutching the vision of the future she intended to protect. What unknown horrors awaited, lurking in the shadows? This was going to be a fight for not just survival, but the very soul of their legacy, and she was determined to win it at any cost. The dark figures surged into the throne room like a tide, their armor gleaming beneath the flickering flames of the torches. Panic gripped the guards, a palpable crackle of tension in the air as swords drawn glinted ominously. The enemy leader grinned, his confidence a sharp knife digging into the budding resolve of Margaret and the few loyal defenders. "Do you truly think you can stop us?" he taunted, his voice smooth yet dripping with derision. "Your child will be ours before the night is through." Margaret's heart sank, a vortex of fear and anger swirling inside her. She hadn't just rallied them to defend, she had ignited something deeper. "We will not yield," she shouted, her voice a beacon in the chaos. She glanced around at the gathered soldiers, catching the eye of the Duke, who had taken his stance alongside her. "Stay together," he commanded, slicing through the din. "We hold the line no matter the cost." As the first wave of Ashenfrost warriors charged, Margaret didn't flinch. Instead, she felt a surge of unexpected courage. Perhaps it was the child within her, urging her to protect their future, their legacy. "Form a shield wall," she called out, waving her arms. "Now, use your bodies as your strongest weapon." Some soldiers exchanged bewildered glances, but the urgency in her voice sparked something within them. They complied, swinging their bodies into formation. Side by side, they locked shields, entering a fortress built not merely of wood and metal, but of shared purpose. As the onslaught collided with their defenses, the sound rang like thunder, echoing in the stone hall. Margaret kept her stance firm, directing the formation with the confidence she didn't know she possessed. "Reinforce the front lines," she hollered. "Flank the left side. We can't let them breach." The tide was turning, albeit slowly. Guards began to respond, falling in sync with her commands. The Duke fought valiantly beside her, his sword singing as he made quick work of an enemy soldier threatening their formation. But the Ashenfrost leader was not mere muscle. He was a strategist. "Close ranks," he shouted to his men, his voice carrying above the belligerents. "Rally behind me. They're breaking." Margaret's stomach turned as she realized that they were beginning to falter. The waves of soldiers crashing against their wall were relentless. She felt the weight of her decision. They might lose everything if she didn't find a way to inspire courage deeper than fear. Fear. It was an old adversary, one she knew far too well. "Remember our homes," she bellowed, her breath hitching with the fervor of her words. "Remember the children who sleep in their beds, the laughter of our families, the dreams of a brighter tomorrow." The cacophony around her faded as her voice rang true. "We do not fight just for ourselves, but for every soul that depends on us." Unbeknownst to her, she was planting seeds of unity among the weary soldiers. There were murmurs, some of them nodding, eyes glimmering with the promise of hope. It was small, but it was enough to keep the light flickering. But from the corner of her eye, Margaret caught a glint of black-clad figures slipping past their line. Her heart raced. "Behind you," she screamed, pointing with urgency. Fear washed over her as she realized this could be the crushing blow. He turned with deadly intent. The realization came too late. She saw the glimmer of his dagger aimed at the Duke, ready to strike. "No," she shouted, her voice cracking. Time slowed as she lunged forward, throwing herself between the Duke and the dagger, the air heavy with the scent of iron and sweat, her heart racing with desperation. In that split second, Margaret felt a fire ignite within her, a mother's instinct to protect, to shield her child at all costs. Was it courage or madness that compelled her? The dagger struck. What would be the price she would have to pay now? What horror hazed just beyond this moment? The world erupted around her as the dagger met flesh. A searing heat shot through Margaret's body, a pain like nothing she had ever known. It was as if fire coursed through her veins, igniting every nerve ending. She gasped, vision blurring. The Duke's eyes widened in disbelief, and he lunged forward, catching her as she stumbled. "Margaret!" His voice broke, panic etched across his face. Blood poured from the wound, soaking her gown, a dark omen against the pale fabric. "No, this can't be the end." The chaos of the battle faded to a distant roar, her senses narrowing to the shouts of the soldiers and the agonizing thrum of her heartbeat. Everything felt surreal, like she was trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. "Hold the line," the Duke shouted, rallying their soldiers back to the fight, but all Margaret could focus on was the tightening grip of darkness around her vision. "Stay with me, Margaret. You have to. I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice trembled and her breath came in short gasps. She fought to draw strength from somewhere, anywhere, even as her body betrayed her. But even a desperate resolve felt like a flickering flame against the overwhelming tide of pain. Around them, the Ashenfrost warriors pressed in, relentless in their assault. Margaret's mind raced. The urge to protect the Duke and the soldiers surged. "We can't give up," she shouted, her words hanging thick in the air, but the strength was fading. Suddenly, an ominous shadow loomed closer, another Ashenfrost soldier, his weapon raised high, ready to deliver a final blow. The Duke's fear turned to fury as he deflected the oncoming strike, his sword clashing with steel. "Margaret!" he yelled again, fighting back the tide. But something within her sparked. igniting the fire of her will. "Stand strong," she insisted. "Fight. For our homes. For our children." Despite the dimming light of her consciousness, those words rang out loud and clear. A feverish spark ignited among the soldiers. They were invigorated, fueled by the desperation of her plea. They rallied, pushing back against the enemy, their united strength carving a path of resistance. But Margaret felt herself slipping away. The world grew hazy, shadows creeping in from all sides. She could hear the harsh breaths around her, the clang of battle echoing in the recesses of her mind. Somewhere, she imagined her child, safe and warm, nestled within her. "For you," she breathed softly, her instinct to protect morphing into a primal need to ensure safety. The Duke caught her again as her strength waned, desperation clawing at him. "Hold on, please. We're almost through this. Just stay with me." But the urgency in his voice was cut short by a chilling scream that sliced through the murmur of battle. It was a sound so laced with betrayal and rage that it froze the blood in her veins. In the distance, the Ashenfrost leader stepped forward. "Your efforts are futile. You fight for nothing." His voice boomed, filled with disdain, reverberating off the throne room walls. "Surrender, and perhaps I'll allow you to keep your precious child." Margaret's stomach twisted at his words. The weight of their loss or victory settled heavily on her shoulders. This battle was more than just for the throne. It was a fight for the future. A flicker of determination coursed through her one last time. "We will never surrender." But as the darkness enveloped her, and the sounds of war began to fade, she could feel that something sinister lurked just beyond the veil. In that moment, Margaret wasn't just fighting for survival. She knew she was fighting for something much larger. What unseen darkness awaited them all? What price was yet to be paid? Would there even be a future in the ashes of this betrayal? As shadows closed in around her, Margaret fought to hold on to consciousness. A ragged breath escaped her lips, with each intake of air stinging like shards of glass in her chest. Her world teetered on the brink, a chaotic whirlwind of noise and pain, yet a relentless flicker of hope urged her to remain steady. "Margaret!" The Duke's voice splintered through the air, raw and desperate. His hands were like iron, gripping her shoulders as if fearing that one moment of carelessness would send her spiraling into the abyss. She turned her gaze to him, the torment in his eyes mirroring her own. "I want to leave you," she forced out, though it felt like a promise made on a fragile thread. Around them, the clash of swords resonated, a cacophony of violence that echoed off the throne room's cold walls. Soldiers were falling, their cries mingling with the hasty clash of metal. The Ashenfrost warriors surged, invigorated by the leader's taunting threats. And there he stood, that twisted figure at the forefront, leader of the Ashenfrost, draped in dark leathers, wielding agony and destruction like weapons. His smile was a grotesque mask, a cruel reminder of their hopelessness. "You think your bravery is enough? Look around. You fight against destiny." His laughter, a taunting wind, twisted through the air. For a fleeting moment, Margaret's heart quaked at his words. Could this really be fate? The insidious grip of despair ran deeper. But just as she felt the tendrils of fear encroaching, a fierce warmth surged from within. "I fight for our future," she shouted, attempting to drown out the darkness creeping into her thoughts. "For our children, for freedom." The soldiers, though weary and battered, found renewed strength in her fierce declaration. Their morale shifted, like the ebbing tide reclaiming the shoreline. Fueled by desperation and a longing for hope, they pressed forward, striking back with ferocity. "Margaret, stay with me," the Duke shouted, urging her to focus. Blood spilled between them, a reminder of their precarious circumstances, yet there was something more at play. In the distance, she saw their banner fluttering in the fierce gusts, a symbol of defiance against the encroaching storm. It flicked and swayed, a signal calling for unity. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to rise, to rally their forces one last time. But as she struggled against the smothering darkness, a horrifying realization struck her. What if our sacrifices mean nothing? The Duke's eyes held hers captive. Then we fight as if they do. We fight for each other. With that spark of connection igniting anew within her, Margaret elbowed free from his hold, wobbling on her feet. The world swayed, but she held firm. "We will not surrender. Not today." Echoes of her words bounced back as they joined the cacophony, each soldier drawing from her strength, standing tall against the tide of adversaries. But just then, from the tumult of battle, a piercing scream cut through like glass, a sound from behind that sapped her strength. No. Her heart dropped as she recognized Isabel's voice, her sister's piercing cry of agony, carried by the wind. Panic coursed through Margaret, overwhelming her senses. Isabel. The Duke turned sharply, urgency washing over him. Stay here, I'll check. No. She yelled, fear cracking her voice. We have to go together. But before they could reconcile, an Ashenfrost warrior lunged toward them, a swift motion that brought them both tumbling to the side. The world twisted, colors blurring as reality spun out of reach. Through the haze of battle, the chilling sound of laughter echoed again, the Ashenfrost leader, triumphant and unyielding. You're too late, my dear lady. The fates have already been sealed. As they fought back to their feet, the undeniable weight of dread settled heavily within Margaret's chest. In the chaos, something terrible had already transpired. Was it possible? Had they lost their chance? The battle raged on, but Margaret's heart was now a battleground of its own. Would their defiance matter if they lost those they loved most? What sacrifices awaited them in the dark expanse of this treachery? And in that moment of realization, a chilling thought crept up. What if the true enemy was closer than they could ever imagine? Margaret's breath quickened, each gasp igniting a sharp bolt of pain through her chest. Her focus narrowed, and her heart pounded wildly in time with the chaos around her. She wheeled to where Isabel's scream had echoed, the terror behind it unfurling like a wave, threatening to drown her in despair. Isabel, she shouted, her voice cracking against the din of the ongoing battle. The Duke's grip tightened on her arm, his face a mask of determination. We can't lose sight of our fight, Margaret. We need to hold the line. But the words felt distant, muffled by the rising tide of panic swelling within her. The soldiers surged around them, fueled by Margaret's earlier rally. Yet now her resolve wavered, glancing at the fray, swallowing everything she held dear, the potential treachery lurking in the depths of the crowd. Then came another scream, spine-chilling and raw, cutting through the air like a blade. It wasn't just Isabel's despair that pierced Margaret's heart, but the sound of familiar voices drawn into the vortex of violence. Let me go? Margaret jerked away from the Duke and dashed toward the chaos, her feet seeming to have a will of their own. No. Margaret, wait. The Duke's shout fell behind her, lost in the torrent of clashing steel and desperate cries that she pressed deeper into the chaos. Time blurred, the reality of each step becoming heavier under the weight of dread. She carved through a tangle of warriors, their shouts fading into a muted background of fear and fury. Each face she glimpsed reflected the horror of their fate, their bravado crumbling when confronted with the possibility of loss. Soldiers fell to relentless blows, each body echoing the finality of being snuffed out like a candle's flame. The essence of her world felt as fragile as glass, and she winced with every scream that reached her ears. Her heart raced as her gaze darted, searching frantically. Just then, amidst a whirlwind of grappling bodies, she spotted a flash of auburn hair, the unmistakable silhouette of her sister, swaying under the weight of two looming Ashenfrost warriors. Margaret's breath constricted to a gasp. Izzy! She screamed again, desperation clawing at her throat, urging her forward. The warriors circled, taunting Isabel, whose back was against the cold stone wall. Margaret's gaze hardened, resolve igniting within her veins. She couldn't abandon her sister, their bond too strong, too vital for her to turn away. Stay back, she cried, summoning every ounce of courage. Drawing a dagger from her belt, she charged into the fray, fueled by adrenaline and fierce love. But as she lunged, metal caught glimmering light. The leader of the Ashenfrost himself stepped forward, an unsettling calm enveloping him. His gaze met hers, his cruel smile twisting her insides. Ah, the brave lady rides to her sister's rescue. How noble and utterly foolish. The words dripped with malice, wrapping around her mind like barbed wire. Step aside, Margaret shouted, her voice steadier than she felt, but her heart hammered against her ribs as uncertainty coiled tighter. Release her now. He chuckled, a low, chilling sound that echoed like a death knell. You still believe there is a way out of this, dear girl? This is far beyond your control. The darkness has claimed its sacrifices. With swift precision, the darkness surged. Another warrior lurched towards Isabel. Time slowed, Margaret's world narrowing to the flicker of the blade slicing through the air. Rage and fear collided in her gut as she leapt forward, striking down the warrior before he reached Isabel. A dashing act, but hardly enough to save either of you, the leader taunted, as shadows gathered ominously around. In that treacherous moment, Margaret caught sight of Isabel's terrified eyes. But the leader's wicked grin told a different story. The tide was shifting, and in the eye of chaos, fate was playing its cruel hand. Would she and her sister find a way to escape the clutches of their dark fate, or would they fall victim to the very shadow that sought to consume them? Margaret, the Duke's voice, thundered, breaking into her thoughts, grounding her momentarily, but the uncertainty loomed larger than ever. At that moment, caught between the grim reality and the flickering flame of hope, Margaret understood she was in a game far more intricate than she envisioned. What treachery lay ahead, and who could she truly trust? The night was still young, but darkness had its own plans. Margaret stood rooted, adrenaline coursing through her body like wildfire. The Duke's voice rang through her, but the sound of steel grinding against steel drowned him out. The chaotic scene unfolded around her, each clash reverberating alongside the thunder of her pulse. She had to save Isabel. The leader's mocking laughter sliced through the fray, a cruel reminder of their dire straits. His warriors shifted, their dark armor glinting as they closed in on her and Isabel. Margaret's body tingled with urgency, her muscles coiling tight, ready to spring. "Margaret, we need to get out. Now," shouted Isabel, her eyes wide with panic. The sight of her sister struggling against shackles of darkness ignited a fire in Margaret's chest. Fear and fury intertwined, surging her forward. "Get back," she shouted, lunging again at the nearest warrior. The clash of blades filled the air, but Margaret's resolve steeled her grip. Each attack felt like a desperate attempt to rewrite the threatening script of their fate. But the leader of the Ashen Frost stood unfazed, observing with an unsettling grin as she fought. "You believe this is a rescue? Foolish girl. You can cut down my soldiers, but you'll never escape me." His voice was a dark undertone. Swelling like a storm, the words slithered into her head, filling it with dread. "Watch me," Margaret yelled, stealing a glance at Isabel. Her sister's voice grew sharper, frantic. The surrounding chaos swallowed the sound as she ducked and dodged. Margaret's dagger crashed against an enemy's sword, sparks erupting in the night. Each connection sent jolts of electricity through her. But the more they fought, the more she realized she was merely a flickering light against an oncoming shadow. There had to be a way out. "Duke," she desperately called, when the corner of her eye caught a glimpse of him pushing through the fighting mass. His determination was evident, yet he seemed too far to reach them. What if she lost him too? In the midst of the turmoil, she felt the breath of darkness close and the leader was moving. He reached for Isabel with a glimmering blade. "No," Margaret screamed, her voice piercing through the chaos as she hurled herself between Isabel and their would-be captor, her dagger poised for a vicious strike. But the leader only laughed, a sound that reverberated through her bones. "You think your bravery can protect her? You don't know the depth of the darkness you face." Suddenly, a deafening roar erupted from above, shaking the ground beneath them. An enormous shadow broke through the clouds, a monstrous creature that blotted out the moonlight. Its scales shimmered, blue and silver, as it dove straight into the clutches of the fray, sending a wave of bodies tumbling like leaves before a storm. Margaret's breath hitched as she realized the creature was aiding them. Yet danger loomed ever more closely. The Ashen Frost had summoned dark forces that would not back down easy. The ground trembled, the air thickened with anticipation. "Margaret, this way." The Duke's voice was clearer now, commanding. He rushed towards them through the shifting shadows, a fierce glint in his eyes that sparkled with a sense of perilous hope. With one last look back at Isabel, Margaret made her choice. She was not just fighting for herself or for her sister, she was fighting for all who could not. Could they escape this darkness together? Or would the night devour them whole? With uncertainty clawing at her spirit, Margaret took a step forward, her heart racing against the impending doom. The battle was far from over, and the shadows whispered secrets of betrayal that lingered in the air. The chaos roared in the throne room, and as Margaret fought her way through the melee, something inside her shifted. The stakes had never been higher, yet an undeniable flame flickered within her, one that couldn't be snuffed out by the gathering darkness. With each step, she felt the weight of her child's life resting on her shoulders, pressing her forward with fierce determination. "Margaret, you can't keep pushing like this," the Duke shouted, finally breaking through the fray to reach her side. The tension in his voice mirrored the urgency bearing down on her heart. "I have to. Isabel needs us," Margaret yelled, stealing a glance at her sister, who still struggled against the Ashenfrost warriors. It ignited the fire within her. She wouldn't let fear strip them of their future. The leader's laughter cut through their resolve like a knife. "You can't save her. Surrender now, and perhaps I'll let you both live." He brandished his weapon, bloodied and gleaming. "Enough," Margaret shouted, her voice ringing out clear and strong amidst the cries of battle. Her hands tightened around her dagger, steadying her resolve even as exhaustion seeped into her bones. "You underestimate us. We're not afraid of you." Time seemed to pause, tension palpable as the eyes of the skirmishers flickered between her and the Ashenfrost leader. This was her moment. If she was to lead, doubt had no place in her heart. "Rally behind me," she cried out, her voice breaking through the din, igniting a flicker of courage in the eyes of those closest. "We will fight together. For our families, for our future." The soldiers hesitated for only a heartbeat before rallying closer, strengthened by her fierce declaration. The chain of valor wrapped around her, surging thick with hope. With renewed strength, she charged forward, the Duke backing her as they pressed against the encroaching tide. The Ashenfrost leader's confidence began to waver as Margaret and the Duke pressed their advantage. "Now," she commanded, every thread of her being focused on protecting her sister. It was then the monstrous figure emerged from the clouds above, an enormous dragon of iridescent blue and silver, arcing through the sky as its roar cut through the battlefield. Eyes lit up, soldiers found their footing, and even adversaries faltered under its majestic presence. "Look," one of the soldiers gasped, awestruck. "Take your chance. Follow her," the Duke cried, pushing through the line to protect those beside him. As the dragon landed, its mass sent shockwaves through the ground, and the Ashenfrost soldiers stumbled back, a moment of hesitation that ignited a wave of courage among Margaret's allies. They surged forward with newfound intensity, separating the chaos between the two factions. "Isabel," Margaret shouted, eyes scanning the fray. "We have to get to her." With the dragon's help, the path between Margaret and her sister opened as soldiers rallied behind her, fighting off their attackers. But just as hope surged within her, a gut-wrenching scream sliced through the air, and she froze. "No, Isabel," Margaret barked, charging across the battleground as fear coursed through her veins. When she reached her sister, the scene sent her heart plummeting. Two warriors pinned Isabel against the wall, bleeding from multiple cuts, gasping for breath. Margaret rushed forward, untangling her sister from the clutches of her captors. "Margaret, I can't," Isabel gasped, choking on her fear. "Yes, you can. We're stronger together," Margaret urged, her voice unwavering. "You have to trust me." Fueled by fury and love, she fought off the first enemy, her dagger slicing through the air. The Ashenfrost leader, seeing his hold starting to falter, rushed toward them, fury ignited in his eyes. But suddenly, the dragon released a fierce roar, and Margaret turned just in time to see the beast launch itself forward, accentuating the turmoil and confusion erupting around them. "Now," the Duke shouted, his eyes fierce as he fought beside Margaret, defending against the leader's advance. With a final effort, Margaret leaned close to Isabel, holding her sister's face in her hands. "We'll make it out of here. You have to believe." "Together," Isabel said, determination igniting in her eyes. Together, they stood against the threat, their hearts racing. Just as the leader charged toward them, Margaret thrust out her dagger, striking true. The blade found its mark, and as the leader fell to the ground, the soldiers let out a triumphant cheer. With the leader's defeat, the tide of battle quickly shifted. The Ashenfrost warriors faltered, whispers of doubt creeping through their ranks. Momentum surged as Margaret realized they could win. "Rally together," she shouted to the remaining soldiers. We cannot let their darkness reign. Push them back. The entry echoed with calls of resistance. The defenders bound together forged a united wall. As the last remnants of darkness faded into the night, Margaret stood tall, victory dripping from her heart, tinged with exhaustion. The looming shadows began to recede, and as dawn broke, she took a moment to breathe. Margaret turned to the Duke, a sense of gratitude dawning around them. Did we win? We held our ground. The Duke replied, his voice choked with relief. We fought for our future, your child's future. And as she looked back at Isabel, their eyes sparkled with a bittersweet understanding. They had faced darkness together, standing as not just sisters, but allies in a history rewritten. Let us never forget the power we found in each other. They clasped hands, wishing for a brighter world, knowing that despite the turmoil they had faced, they had fought for more than just survival. They had fought for hope and all that was yet to come. This victory would ripple into the future, reminding them of the strength found in unity. And as the sky lightened, battered but unbroken, Margaret knew she would face tomorrow ready to shape it, her child cradled within her, a beacon of hope to illuminate a world barely emerging from shadows forevermore. Now, before you move on, this is your chance. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss any of the exclusive stories coming your way. Smash that like button to help raise visibility and feed the algorithm. And flood the comments with your thoughts. How did this journey impact you? I want to hear all your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this ending. Your support makes all the difference. Let us build this community together.